Hello and welcome to Red Shirt Cinema Club, a weekly podcast about falling in love with Star Trek. This week's film is Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. Join us as we discuss unnecessarily sexy cat people, Uhura's textbook distraction tactics, and God, Shatner doesn't do things by halves, does he? Is Rob a Star Trek fan yet? After that, keep listening to find out.
From a relaxing vacation on Earth.
Greetings, Captain. I do not think you realize the gravity of your situation.
To the most perilous reaches of space. Only one crew dare travel where no man has ever gone before.
We'll need all the power you can muster, mister.
On a desolate planet, a renegade Vulcan seeks ultimate knowledge.
To find it, you'll need a starship.
And he will stop at nothing to get it.
I dreamt that a madman had taken over the Enterprise.
You look like you've just seen a ghost.
Perhaps I have, Captain. Our destination is the planet Shakari, Eden, at the center of the galaxy.
The center of the galaxy can't be reached.
If you ask me, and you haven't, I think this is a terrible idea. We're bound to bump into the Klingons.
Remain on course.
To Kirk, he's a fanatic to be fought.
You know we'll never make it through the Great Barrier.
I say the danger is an illusion.
To the crew, he's a mystic to be followed.
Cybok has simply put us in touch with feelings that we've always been afraid.
I have to get back to the transporter.
To Spock, he's the past he must confront.
Shoot him!
You know I'm right.
Spock, my only concern is getting the ship back. And you're either with me or you're not.
Put him in the brig with Captain Kirk.
I'm a prisoner on my own ship.
What are you standing around for? Do you not know a jailbreak when you see one? Mr. Scott, you're amazing. There's nothing amazing about it. I know this ship like the back of my hand.
Emergency channel open.
A hostile force has taken control of our vessel. Put us on a direct course with the Great Barrier.
Understood, Enterprise. We are dispatching a rescue ship immediately.
Clark!
Bird of prey bearing 105, Mark II.
Let me do something.
Mr. Sulu, full ahead.
Transfer power to warp drive. Warp speed now.
The greatest enterprise of all is adventure. Star Trek V: The Final Frontier.
Hello and welcome to Red Shirt Cinema Club. My name is Captain David Jackson.
No, it's not.
I'm joined today, as always, by my trusty first officer, Nathan Dyson.
Hello.
You always go along with it, though. And
I can't disrupt the recording.
and civilian observer, Rob Pearson.
Am I not in for a promotion anytime soon?
Do you know what, Rob? Actually, on my notes, I can confirm this with you. I've written Ensign Rob.
What does that mean?
It means that you would have been promoted, but I decided as recording that actually not quite yet.
Oh.
I think we need to see what happens with today's podcast.
Ensign is
before-
like the lowest rank.
Okay.
I also do think I should confer with my first officer on this one, to be fair.
Fair enough.
So we'll see. You are listening to Red Shirt Cinema Club. If you've got no idea what's going on, even after our wonderful intro, this is episode 6 of our series in which Nathan and I are trying to convince our good friend Rob to love Star Trek by showing him the Star Trek movies. And we are up to Star Trek V: Final Frontier.
Oh.
If you haven't seen it yet, I implore you to go and give it a watch before you listen to this podcast, because we're going to be talking about all the spoilers, everything that happens, everything we liked, everything we didn't like. And I just don't think you're going to get as much joy out of it if you haven't seen the movie yet. So please do go and give it a watch. Before we get to that, we've also been tracking Rob's journey towards becoming a Star Trek fan by way of a warp speed. And after last week's movie, which was Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home,
A great movie.
Rob increased his warp factor by 2 to warp 5. We're now traveling at warp factor 5.
Yeah, we are.
It's pretty quick. Stuff's
So-
really flying past the windows.
It's those long streaks now. Those stars, they're proper long streaks. So I'm very excited to see at what speed we might be traveling after we've spoken about Star Trek V, the frontal, not the frontal.
lobotomy.
That's although I do think that Shatner probably did propose it was called The Frontal Frontier.
There is a dance in there.
There is a dance in there. We'll get to that. We start, as we always start, with Rob's synopsis of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
Well then.
I'm so looking forward to this.
So, 5 movies in now, and still, no one is ever ready for anything, ever. Every Star Trek movie ends with we're back on the Enterprise now, we're ready to go.
Yeah.
We're still not ready to go.
I know.
We're camping in Yosemite. Actually, first of all, we're on Nimbus 3, the galactic planet of peace.
Nice. Sounds nice.
It does, doesn't it? But quite quickly it becomes not nice. We're introduced to a mysterious character very early on, hooded, and he comes up to this. I don't know who the heck the guy with no teeth is. I'm just going to say that now. I don't know if I'm supposed to know. I don't know his name.
No.
But he's just there, and he encounters this mysterious hooded figure who invites this man with no teeth to share his pain. And he does so, and he becomes sort of enraptured by this mysterious hooded figure who reveals himself to be a Vulcan, which I was quite surprised by because I thought, this guy's not acting very Vulcan-like.
And can I just say, amazing that you now know Star Trek well enough to recognise a Vulcan and then recognise when they're not being that Vulcan.
Yes.
This is amazing.
I mean, note that down on my appraisal form.
Absolutely.
Getting promoted to ensign.
Yeah. Can recognise different species of alien. Okay.
Anyway, after that brief intro, we're in Yosemite Park. The crew of the Enterprise is all on shore leave. Kirk is inexplicably solo climbing El Capitan.
Definitely got nothing to do with the fact that he also directed the movie and helped write the movie.
It's very unlikely, but he's doing it. And McCoy is down below watching with like space binoculars, very nervous. And then Spock appears with some like anti-gravity boots. Is this the first time the anti-gravity boots have appeared in Star Trek, or is this a thing?
As far as I'm aware, it is the first time. I mean, I'm not sure I'd call them anti-gravity boots as much as rocket boots.
Rocket boots. Yeah. And he distracts Kirk, and Kirk falls off the mountain, and like Superman, Spock rockets down with his boots and catches him just before he splats on the ground. And then they all share a little joke, and McCoy and Kirk try and teach Spock the words to row, row, row your boat. It's a very strange scene. And anyway, I can't remember the exact order of these events, but we're back on Nimbus 3 at some point, and the mysterious hooded figure, whose name is Sarbok. Cybok.
Yeah.
Cybok. He goes into a space bar. There's another space bar.
Yeah.
Some interesting things going on in the space bar.
Liquid
Some pool
pool
is being played in a pool.
Yeah.
Everyone loves
when
pool.
you put it like that.
And there is an alien cat lady with 3 breasts.
Yes.
Dancing.
3 is a strange number for a cat to have, isn't it? But
yes.
we shouldn't dwell.
No.
And there's a strange situation that takes place where Cybok takes 3 diplomats hostage. One human or Terran, is that the same thing?
Yes.
A Romulan
Yeah.
and a Klingon.
Yeah.
And it seems like he's got a devious plan in mind. And I think from judging by what he said to the man with no teeth in the previous scene, he basically he's trying to lure a starship to the planet Nimbus for reasons we don't know yet. So he takes these 3 diplomats hostage, and the distress signal goes out to the Klingons, presumably the Romulans as well, but I don't think we ever really see that. Yeah. And also the Federation. And so there's the Klingon warship is called, I wasn't clear whether it was, surely not the same bird of prey. Are they all just called the bird of prey, all the Klingon ships?
It's like the design, yeah.
Right, okay. So there is a bird of prey ship with a warrior on board who wants to prove how good a Klingon warrior he is, and he feels like the only way he can prove that is to defeat Captain James T. Kirk in battle. So he's like, we'll answer this distress call because they're probably going to send the Enterprise as well, and I'll get to take down Kirk. Great. So we've got something set up there. The Enterprise, despite the fact for some reason it's in a terrible state, is also cooled to head to this situation to rescue the hostages, which means that all the crew have to be rounded up, and it falls to Uhura to round everybody up. And there's a scene where Chekhov pretends there's a blizzard happening, and he blows into the
I'd forgotten about that.
the recorder.
Yeah.
and she goes to where Bones and Spock and Kirk are, where they're singing their campfire songs and toasting marshmallows. And shore leave is cancelled, basically. Shore leave is cancelled. Everyone has to return to the Enterprise. It's in a state. The doors aren't working. But anyway, we're off. We're off to Nimbus 3. So we get to Nimbus 3, and the plan to save the hostages is that Kirk and a detachment is going to go down to the planet, and Chekhov pretends to be the captain of the Enterprise.
I like that.
And parlays with Sybok. But while all that is happening, the ground team, the A team,
the away team,
is trying to get to the space bar by means of some horses. For some reason, they got to ride horses there.
Yeah.
But to get the horses, they have to... Anyway, Uhura provides a distraction.
Well said.
They get the horses.
That's what I was shaking my head at, by the way, just that whole business.
And they get to the space bar, and basically, it turns out it's all been a ruse. The diplomats who were taken hostage are all in on the plan, and Sybok basically wants to commandeer a spacecraft. And so commandeers the Enterprise. I can't remember the exact nature of how he convinces Kirk that actually I'm in charge of your ship now. But they return to the Enterprise.
It's unusual.
There's just numbers, really. It's just a numbers game. There's many of them.
They return on the escape shuttle, and a bit of peril happens where they realise they can't use the tractor beam to get the shuttle back into the Enterprise, because that would mean they have to take the shields down, in which time the Klingon ship, which has now arrived, will absolutely blow the Enterprise to bits. So they have to do an exciting thing where Sulu has to drive manually into the back of the Enterprise, which he's never attempted before.
Plan B.
He does it just, crashes a little bit on the way in. The shields come down momentarily. The Klingon ship fires, but they manage to warp speed away from the torpedo just before it hits.
Classic.
Which is very exciting.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're on board now, and it transpires that Sybok is actually Spock's half-brother.
Yeah.
They're both the son of Sarek. Although Sybok is a full Vulcan, the son of a Vulcan priestess or princess. But we learn that he is a rogue Vulcan who has been banished from Vulcan society because he had strange ideas about being in touch with emotions and being passionate, which explains his behaviour that doesn't quite fit in with the rest of Vulcan kind. Anyway, Kirk orders Spock to... Just shoot him, for God's sake. But Spock can't, because he realises, this is my brother, you can't order me to kill my brother. And Sybok locks Kirk and Spock and everyone in the brig, and he goes up to the deck, and he does his share your pain thing with lots of the crew, and they're enraptured by his charisma, and they all seem to be on Sybok's side. And it transpires Sybok's plan is he wants to go through the barrier in the middle of the galaxy, because he's had a vision from God, and he's enraptured by this. He's almost like cult-like and in his fervour, and he wants to get through the barrier, and everyone's like, "Oh, this isn't a very good idea," but Sybok has faith, and the Enterprise... I think I'm skipping over a bunch here, but the Enterprise makes it through the barrier.
We'll get into it. It's fine.
We'll get into it. The Enterprise makes it through the barrier. Fine, as it happens. They manage to get through the barrier,
quickly.
and they discover at the centre of the galaxy is actually this mysterious planet. And they land on the planet. It appears deserted. Sybok's not having any of it, though, and he calls out, "We've travelled so far to get here, we're here." And all of a sudden, this mysterious structure materialises out of the desert.
Yeah.
And what appears to be...
a Terry's chocolate orange.
and then
not as tasty.
And then God appears in front of Sybok, the God of many faces, and we see imagery from many religions, and then a bearded old man, like the image of the traditional stereotypical image of God, if you will. Sybok is convinced by this being that he is who he says he is, and he's come for his wisdom, and the godlike being wants the Enterprise in order to spread his wisdom throughout the universe. Kirk's not buying it, though. He's like, if you're God, why would you need the Enterprise to get out of here? And
you shut up.
And God's like, who are you? And Kirk smart. It's like, well, if you're God, surely you already know who I am.
Oh, stop using that same argument against me.
And Kirk and God, in inverted commas, I will show you who I am, and does a laser eye on Kirk, and then he does a laser eye on Spock as well. And Cyborg, realizing his mistake, tries to redeem himself. And I didn't quite understand what was going on here, but he does some kind of thing with the godlike being, and the godlike being takes on the appearance and voice of Cyborg at this point. I wasn't quite following what was going on here. But that's enough for the Enterprise to beam up both Spock and McCoy, but not Kirk. Kirk is left behind to face this godlike entity on his own, and it looks, for all intents and purposes, like he's about to die until the bird of prey, which has followed the Enterprise through the barrier, arrives in the nick of time and beams Kirk up and blows up the godlike entity with its own rockets. And it turns out that Spock has gone on board with the Klingon ambassador, who is the superior of the warrior on the Klingon ship, and he tells him to say sorry to Kirk.
Yes, he does.
And he says sorry to Kirk, and then they go back to Yosemite and sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. The end!
That is the end.
A nice full circle there. I bet Shatner was really pleased with the row, row, row your boat. You know, I bet he, I don't know why I'm being mean to him, but I bet he was like, hey, that's good writing there. Like, we come back to row, row, row your boat. At the end.
Circular.
There were some good jokes about row, row, row your boat, though. God, it's hard to say.
There was a reference about, I quite liked the reference about, is this a dream? Maybe life is all a dream.
Yeah. I mean,
it's quite nice. Row, Row, Row Your Boat is just such a childish song, though. It's like singing
Classic.
The Wheels on the Bus.
It is. I tried to imagine the three of us going camping and me suggesting we did a sing-along.
I thought of us
the
three
death
singing.
looks I would get. Like, no, we're not
We're
doing
not
that.
singing.
No way are we singing.
What would we sing? What would you suggest?
One of the Luigi songs from the launch of PS4.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
I would sing that.
Yeah, Black Ops 3.
Calling a UAV. I don't know where you'd be.
Well, it's a bit lowest common denominator, but we always ask this question. Did you enjoy the film?
No.
Oh.
Wow.
No.
Well,
a
I'm not
straight
that
no
surprised.
this time.
I've got a 2 rating system. Was it a good film? No.
No.
Did I enjoy the film? Quite a lot.
Yeah. And
You enjoyed it?
Yeah.
For my part...
This is one I've only seen half of once, so this is quite new to me as well.
I will say there are bits I did enjoy, and there were things I thought were interesting.
Yeah.
I thought overall it felt very... Tonally, it just felt completely at odds with everything I've seen so far. Yeah. I don't know how many times they need to explain to me who these characters are, what Spock can do, the fact that he's half human. Like, man, I didn't know about it's movie 5 now. Like, I know everyone
Do something
knows
else with these characters.
And then it's like, okay, we've got to make sure that people who've never seen any Star Trek before know who these characters are. Okay, fine. But then they're like making references to the fact that Spock's died previously, all these little in-jokes.
True, I liked him before he
So
died.
what are you doing? And also just the humour fell completely flat for me. Like, I thought the fourth film was really funny, made me laugh quite a lot. The interplay and the banter between the characters. The bit where Uhura was gathering the crew up on Yosemite was supposed to be funny, but just wasn't. Like when Chekhov's blowing into the thing, oh, there's a blizzard here. Just awful.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that, like, for me, that landed on the performances. I didn't think their performances, those specific moments you mentioned, were that good. But I still think
you're coming around to it being Shatner's fault.
No, not at all. I'm saying I still think that the Fab Three, as I'm calling them, I think that their relationship was still as strong as ever on screen. I still enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the camping.
But we just didn't see as much of
but
that
I thought,
between the three of them in this film.
I thought the sort of secondary cast didn't do as well in this. They had some difficult jobs, apart from Scotty, who I genuinely did enjoy.
The bit where he bangs his head is also
genius.
Just really bad.
It's genius.
It's really bad.
Excellent. Well, but that was like
compare that to Hello Computer. It's just night and day.
This is what I'm saying. I kind of agree with you. I did think those bits were rubbish. I also thought the main 3 were quite rubbish. I appreciate there was loads of humour, but I kind of feel like we've just seen a movie where those moments really pay off. And we talked about it being sort of, Avengers Marvel style. The difference is writing the material that those character plays off those characters and those performances well. And I guess this just wasn't it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Like, Don't Call Me Tiny, that's funny. Like, blowing into a communicator is just not funny.
No.
And the dance, man. Can we talk about the dance?
Yeah, I mean, we were going to get there. The dance is
What
a
was
really
going on?
strange choice, I think. Like, in every possible way. It's just a terrible, and it's very not Star Trek, in my opinion.
That's what it felt. It didn't feel. Star Trek has felt up until now very progressive to me, and that just did not feel progressive.
It felt like a real throwback to something that might
Yes.
happen in the original series.
Right.
Like, make the girl dance.
Yeah.
It's such a...
Was she actually, not actually, but I mean, was she supposed to actually be naked? Where did they get feathers from? They had big feathers.
I know.
Why
Well,
were
all of these movies have been about the crew aging gracefully, basically from 2 onwards. And this was like a real step in a strange direction.
And all of that feels completely unnecessary. Like, they landed too far away from the bar, which I can understand if it's like you're trying to be covert or whatever. But then that's why they needed the horses, which is why they needed the distraction. And it all feels like just a way to have Uhura do a sexy dance.
And a way to have horses.
Yeah. And also there was a sexy cat in the bar. We've already seen cat people in at the end of Search
Are they
for
related?
Spock.
Maybe they're like Romulans and Vulcans.
She has a fight
And
with Kirk.
that's a very different cat person, though.
Yeah,
They were sensible cats. This was sexy cat lady.
It's a pole cat.
And it feels a little
Pole
bit...
dancing cat. Come on, that's...
Oh, yeah, that's
okay,
good,
cool.
yeah. It's a bit icky. It's all a bit icky.
The noises, whatever they were trying to dub into her vocal performance while he was just sort of holding her up and walking around.
Yeah.
It was weird. I didn't like it at all.
But we never got to what I think of the film. And I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I expected. I've been waiting for this one as a bit of a
low ebb.
A low ebb. And I didn't think it was as bad as I've remembered, or that bad even. And I've enjoyed going through chronologically, because I'd never watched the films chronologically.
Yeah.
I think that context helped me to enjoy the film a lot more. And also, I've never thought of it as about Shatner directing it before, and I thought it was going to be just bad, and I was going to be embarrassed for him. But I didn't get that at all.
And all the reading I'd done was he's a bit embarrassed about it. Here's all the reasons it went wrong, like writer's strike, budget cuts, coming after 2 big successes from like his long-term sort of co-star / rival, all disaster in the making. But yeah, I felt the same. I was kind of like, oh, this is not the disaster I was expecting. This is a film with some off moments.
Yeah. Let's talk about the theme, because I thought, and I remembered it having a much kind of stronger message or something to say. And you think, obviously we're talking about God, the idea of God. Is there a God? What's our place in the universe? All this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In reality, it feels like the film starts maybe like it's in that way and just veers off completely. And then they're just like, oh, it's not a God. It's just a creature. Just sort of pretending. I was like, was there a message here? It feels like every film before this has had something, a theme, kind of an ending bit where I go, oh, okay.
Right.
And the ending bit for this was row, row, row your boat. It was like, hey, they're sort of friends again, or still.
It's got very little to do with
the God stuff was the stuff I thought was the most interesting.
I thought it was interesting, but I just don't think it went anywhere.
No, but I don't think it necessarily has to go anywhere. I put that being whatever it was up there with the big ship that Vija was encased in the first bit, the probe from the fourth film. I don't need to know what this thing was. I think it's just interesting that whatever it is has obviously been sealed here behind this barrier at the center of the universe and this mysterious planet. Who knows by what or when?
Yes.
And obviously it's been put there because they don't want it to escape. It's quite powerful, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Also,
Laser eyes.
like the image of this thing. We're set in the 23rd century here. I don't know what role Christianity plays in the world of Star Trek in the 23rd century.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it is not a big factor in the world of the 23rd century.
No.
Are they saying that this is the God that Christians have been worshipping for
That
all
would have
these
been an
thousands of
amazing
years?
idea.
Is it actually they've got here and it turns out that it's, it's the false God trope. It's the evil God trope.
It's the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah,
Right?
behind the curtain.
Yeah.
I would have liked that a lot more. I feel like the explanation maybe because I felt exactly the same. And I think it's easy for all the press and the media to laugh at it going, oh, Shatner directs a movie now and he's made Kirk versus God.
Yeah.
Which is like a funny line, but actually I don't think it plays out in the movie. And I was also expecting a bit more. And I think they had to cut quite a lot towards the end because they lots of their kind of last minute budget reductions meant that there was going to be a bigger showdown and stuff. But really I think it's because Shatner came in with, like, his idea was they go and it's literal they want to try and find God, like not like a dummy God, and then they get there and it's the devil. And so his was like it's all genuine. And I think the execs of Paramount were very cagey about, you know, God in American audiences. You have to be extremely careful. And Roddenberry, basically along your themes, was really against it because he was saying, well, like this is such a myopic view from our current sort of perspective, but how many different religions do we have just on Earth? And then how many would you have on all the planets of the Federation? You can't really make something which is representative of a universal God experience. So I think what happened was it started off with that, we're going to do God and we're going to do big ideas. And then it got watered down. But I think the train was kind of running and they couldn't completely turn around and do a different idea. So we end up with this, which doesn't really work. Well, there's some interesting stuff sort of hanging
There's definitely some interesting stuff. I can see there was a good story to be told. It does kind of fall apart. It's like they find this creature. They say, "Are you God?" And it goes, "Oh yeah, yeah." And then they go, "Oh no, you're not." And it goes,
"There is no
I'm not. I'm just evil."
It's all on Sybok, right? It's all like it's just him just slowly realizing there isn't like a big twist moment.
No.
So wasn't clear to me was where Sybok's vision came from.
It's not explained at all.
Had it come, because I thought, okay, it's come from this creature. This creature is
This
creature has an escape plan. It needs a starship, and Sybok is a pawn essentially.
Yes.
He's been summoned through by this vision or whatever. He thinks he needs the starship, but really it's this thing that needs the starship
it's
to escape.
It's a missing link, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably the truth of it and definitely the right interpretation, but they don't tell you that or show you that.
If he's able
to
shoot messages from his planet prison,
yes,
why would he only send it to one guy on a planet with no access to space?
Yes, well, I would argue that Sybok is a sort of
research make him open to it in some way?
I think he's
did he discover something?
Spock thinks of him as an incredibly gifted and an unusual Vulcan, and if every other Vulcan is closing themselves off to this sort of possibility, I don't know. It's not a good excuse. Right. I could see it kind of working. I wanted to ask you guys about Sybok, actually, what you think of him. Well, I'll just ask that question first. What's your interpretation of Sybok? Is he a good guy? Does he mean well? And does he have a power at all, or what?
I basically think he is a good guy, and I was really confused about the power, and then everything I've read about it just went, what he's doing is using Vulcan mind melding powers to, but with his sort of access to emotions, he has this power to sort of...
he doesn't even need to touch them.
Yeah.
He can just sense.
Because that stuff is crazy.
He felt like a misguided, but ultimately well-intentioned religious fanatic is how I interpreted him. Like he's not trying to do anything bad, and he's sort of got lost in his fanaticism along the way.
Yeah. He's very genuine.
And ended up doing bad things, but I don't think he has any evil will towards anyone. Like he's not out to get Kirk or anything.
I would almost completely agree, apart from one moment which brought this a little bit into question for me, which was he pretty much seems to help everybody. That guy right at the start, you say guy with no teeth. I'd argue he's got teeth.
He's got incredible.
He's got unusual teeth.
Unusual teeth.
And, he seems to actually help that guy. And then everybody, up on the bridge of the Enterprise is like, oh, and I genuinely helped. He helps McCoy, obviously. The one moment where I thought it actually seemed like he was trying to force his desire on someone else was with Spock, because he obviously shows Spock this memory, which isn't even a memory because Spock, can't remember being a baby, I'm sure. Maybe he can. And it's supposed to be this pain that Spock has, that his father was disappointed in how human he was, although I don't know how it can have been a surprise, Sarek. And Spock says, that's not, I don't feel like that anymore.
It's not me, bro.
Like I used to feel like that, and that, but I don't feel like that anymore.
So that had an element of manipulation.
It had an element of manipulation.
Maybe you couldn't read Spock because he's emotionless.
Well, yes, I had to guess with that one.
A bit of a reach.
But that was the only moment, because otherwise I think, yeah, exactly, like a misguided, well-meaning man is my overarching kind of impression. But
I thought that
memory's
made him
a misstep.
Sort of weaker because in a way, because it was just like there's so little conflict really. It's like just in terms of what the overall kind of thing of a movie is doing. What is it making us think? Is there danger? And there's the threat of the Klingons or whatever. But it's this well-intentioned man dragging everyone to this place and then realizing he's wrong is not like a huge. And it kind of goes along with everything else. Like he's not even really God. Like everything's getting watered down. The stakes are just lower and lower, aren't they? And I thought that was an issue. Two things I wanted to say about Cyborg. And the first was, it made me realise that all Vulcans have names which begin with S and end in K.
Right, yeah.
Like Spock, Sarek, Savik.
No, yeah.
But I don't think that's I just think it's
I don't think that's canon. Or that's not law that's how it happens.
Doesn't Savik end in a C?
No, I don't think so.
It's K. Yeah.
Mr. Savik. And the other one was just that Shatner was inspired initially, and I think it's the worst inspiration, by televangelists. And that's where he was kind of, that's where the beginning of the story came from. And actually that would kind of lend itself, I thought, more to, I was expecting to see a story about someone hiding greed or other nefarious intentions underneath. And it does sort of undermine that a little bit. I mean, maybe it's more interesting because of it.
I think it could have looked at it in many more interesting ways. Like the fact that he still needs weapons and to be so underhand kind of undermines his... I'd be interested in seeing him as more of a sort of mysterious evangelist who seems to have a power that no one understands. I mean, he does, but then he also has to use guns to kind of force his way.
I quite like the idea that you can start a revolution with the power of belief, and you can get off a planet and you can steal a star. It felt like it was building and building, but then really it's... I mean, as we've said a few times with these movies, it's just one starship going to a place and doing a thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he'd made this because especially in like the scope of the Federation, it's like planets and planets and different systems, and they could all be like, oh, we're stirring things up. And there wasn't really any of that, was it? He's taken over one bar and then one spaceship.
Let's have a chat about the Klingons, because they get probably their biggest part in any of the movies so far. I think even Search for Spock, I think there's a bit more Klingon. I felt like there was a bit more Klingon action in this one.
I just thought they were rubbish. That's why I'm laughing.
And I'm interested to know what you both think, especially Rob, I guess, because this is sort of, your only experience really so far has been with Christopher Lloyd's gang. Mm-hmm. Did they feel in any? Do they feel of the same ilk? Do they feel different?
I don't know what Klingons are. I don't know what their deal is. I really don't, because you get Klingons who seem really primitive.
Yeah.
Like this Klar guy in this movie just wants to kill Kirk.
Yeah.
And then you get Klingons like the ambassador in the previous film right at the start, who wants justice for the wrong that's been done against the Klingons by Kirk. And you get the diplomat in this movie as well, who we're introduced to him like belching. It's just a big fat Klingon who's belching. But towards the end, I don't get the Klingon race at all. I don't get what their deal is. I don't know what the point of them is. I don't know what they're supposed to be.
I know what they're supposed to be, but I can't disagree with anything you're saying.
No.
They're basically the Russians in the original TV series, just like the constant bad guys. And that will be important for an upcoming thing. And then I think, as Dave said, they're kind of space Vikings. So just put those two things together.
Yeah.
And you get with this rubbish mishmash.
And they are sort of pendulum swinging between all of those sort of polar opposites, as you say, sort of like well-spoken ambassador to...
Hey, this time they had a big, strong woman.
They did.
And they had that uncomfortable bit of business in the party right at the end where Sulu and Chekhov are following her around.
Yeah.
I guess it's not unusual that an entire race has stupid people and not stupid people, and politicians and warriors, and that's true. That's fine. But my brief interactions with Klingons so far, I don't know what I'm supposed to think of them. I don't know whether they're supposed to be the bad guys, because they're people that quite often are in conflict with humans and other races, but not to the point where they're just ubiquitously bad. There are diplomats.
Well, it's interesting
because politics there.
It's interesting because this film is now happening at the same time as The Next Generation, which is the new TV series, as we talked about, with a new crew, and one member of that crew is a Klingon, which is a very new thing.
Oh.
So the original series, the Klingons were just the bad guys, as Nath said.
Yeah.
Currently,
100 years later,
this neutral zone is like where there's a treaty between the Federation and Klingons, and in The Next Generation, there's still a treaty, but it's much more friendly. It's not friendly, but it's much more friendly, and there's even this Klingon member of the crew. So I think in The Next Generation they are figuring all this out and but it's in the movies they have not figured it out.
In the original series, you get a Russian on the helm of the bridge, and it's kind of like, hey, we're progress. And then the way that they show it in The Next Generation is there's a Klingon, basically doing the same thing, but for the fiction.
How do we feel about Klingon bastards again?
Racist. It was.
I thought it was just a bad line delivered badly. It made me go, oh.
But can I talk about because you were talking about there's politics. Well, I was really surprised that in watching the first kind of 10 minutes, I really liked. I don't know. It's not very Star Trek. I really was surprised at how much I enjoyed that very opening scene. It felt like it had the kind of odd desolation of like a Mad Max or something. I quite like that weird guy with weird or no teeth.
Yes.
And I didn't hate Cyborg in that scene. And what I really enjoyed was David Warner, criminally underused in this movie, I thought, but he was really good fun. The rubbish Romulan lady, and then the
is he the human guy?
Yes.
I was trying to figure out who he was because I definitely recognised him.
He's from Tron and loads of other stuff.
Loads of stuff.
And I liked that kind of it was his dialogue which explained the planet was supposed to be one thing and it's gone wrong, and it's like it felt like a different brand of sci-fi where they would talk about how basically the future of space is going to be very much like what we've done on Earth, and it's going to be rubbish, and you convince people to go to a colony somewhere, and you need worker families and whatever, and you lie to people to get settlers, and then you have to live there and it's rubbish. And it felt unusual for Star Trek, but I was kind of like, I was into it. It's like, because the Federation's always so clean, and everything's fine, and we've solved all the problems, and then here was a place where there are loads of problems.
I totally agree. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And also, I don't know, I always look at these things stupidly. I thought it was interesting that we had a pre-opening credits scene. I think it's the first time we've had a pre-opening credits scene in these movies.
We've had flashbacks, haven't we, previously?
We did, but there was the Wrath of Khan flashback in Search of Spock, I think.
Flashbacks.
But I thought that was interesting, and yeah, didn't star any of the primary cast or anything or characters we know. I thought it was good as well, and really set up an interesting, especially when you're going to spend probably too long after that in Yosemite, where I was like, let's move this along a bit.
Can I want to ask two questions because Rob mentioned something earlier on. Just on the subject of Cyborg, I really like the guy who played him as well. I thought he was really, really good. And did he remind you of anyone, Dave?
Not off the top of my head.
Because Rob's got a bit of trivia as well.
Yes. Originally, they offered the part to Sean Connery.
Really?
But he had a scheduling conflict with Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade.
He made the right choice.
And so, in honour of Sean Connery...
Oh, no way.
They named the planet Shakari.
Shakari. Sean Connery.
Yeah. That's difficult waters once again.
Did he ask for that? Does he want that? Does he go?
I don't know.
Does someone say like, Sean, do you know we actually named the planet? And he's like, I don't care. I really don't care. I'm never watching that film.
I'm working with Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, I really
never talk to me again.
I don't care. That is a good bit of trivia though. Thank you for that.
I like something Luckinbill, I think his name was.
Yes,
really good.
He was good.
He was really good.
And my immediate reaction to Spock having a half brother or brother initially was like, no, and then I quickly softened and was like, actually, I can believe this. I can see this happening. It seems fine. Why would Spock mention it? He's the one person who can get away with not talking about his personal life in sort of any kind of way. And I thought it was very believable, and it was interesting. As you mentioned, Rob, recognizing like Vulcans who have got this very clear, unlike the Klingons, this very clear kind of way and belief system and whatever, and to meet one that was different was actually really interesting, and seeing that like emotions as being kind of outlawed and like a rebel for thinking in that way, I thought was a really cool idea. One little question I've got: did you guys get the sense? Maybe it's just blatant that Uhura fancies Scotty? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I thought that was to do with her mind going a bit weird when she was enraptured by Cybok's
the first scene
thing
they were chatting about.
She brought him lunch. Yeah, she brought him lunch. She brought him those space crisps.
Yeah, well, I definitely noticed it, and it's not been anywhere in any of the previous films that I've noticed.
No, I don't think it has either. And also, Cybok, if his power is to relieve people's pain, that's all he had done for Uhura. And she was kind of talking like, oh, there's no reason for me to sit on these emotions anymore. I'm just going to tell you. And he was like, oh, I don't have time for this. Bye. It seemed incredibly scared in a way that I really quite actually warmed to.
I want those other members of the crew to have something to do, but I ultimately thought it was a bit denigrating and strange.
I think that they all had the worst time they've had, apart from Scotty, who probably had I thought he had a fine time. It wasn't bad. He does some useful stuff, and he's helpful.
It was like if I'd written Scotty in this movie.
Yeah.
It's just like a caricature of Scotty.
Yeah.
Do a bit where he's got like a wrench and he's shouting at some people to fix something.
Yeah.
I had two things I wanted to bring up really specifically. One's very quick, which is the nerve pinch on a horse.
Oh my God.
Which was just amazing. Did you?
Oh yes, yeah, I remember that.
Completely unnecessary.
I loved it.
It took ages as well.
I love the idea. He's like trying to find. Is it here? Is it a bit further down the main?
Yeah.
Like, where am I going to do
Just
this?
a bad bit.
I actually really liked it. I thought that's exactly the kind of humour I am here for. And
It's like the precursor to Legolas surfing down the trunk of an oliphant.
massive shark jumping.
Yeah.
And the other thing was Cyborg's vision scenes, which
Yeah.
I guess explained by the mind melding power. But when it gets into that, the main three characters, and I think they are kind of separated more by this film than they have been in the other films.
It felt very video gamey to me, like something that would happen in the penultimate level of a video game just before you learn your ultimate limit break. You must confront your past.
Yeah, remember when you killed your dad? Were they supposed to be literal? Because there was one point where there's like, what are we seeing? It's like, everyone's seeing this. There's no pretense there's like a mental episode.
Yeah, it felt theatrical to me because it did seem like they were stepping into a scene, and it was in my mind, no doubt that Kirk and Spock could see McCoy's vision. Like they were just definitely watching it, and if they weren't, they didn't do a good job of showing that.
I'm not sure that that's been thought about in the making of the movies very well.
No,
because I think obviously it's not happening in reality.
No.
Unless there's,
it's not.
You could make the leap and say, oh, they're by this weird godlike creature. Maybe he's got some, but it's not. They've just overlooked it.
But then the other thing was, I kind of felt like a little bit small-minded for, like, does it matter? Or in Star Trek, like, if you want me to invent a reason, I can invent a reason. But
I want them to have shared that experience. I think as friends as well, it felt like they were kind of all learning a little bit more about each other. They all learned about Spock. And
I
his
liked the
brother.
scenes.
I did. I thought they were pretty powerful. And also just learning. I mean, that's a pretty important thing to learn about Bones.
Yeah,
and quite a traumatizing thing as well to know that he did what he thought was right at the time in assisting his father, who was in a lot of pain, to die. And then soon after discovering that there could have been a cure, that's a big thing. But what I really enjoyed was Kirk's stance on it. So you're not taking my pain away. That's what makes me human. Yes, yes, James.
I was gonna mention that. Really interesting because I think they've got a scene they could have played out very easily, like the imaginings probably of David being killed, having this son, and then he's taken away very quickly. And I would assume that that's what Kirk is talking about, but also I love the ambiguity.
I do.
Of just he's got this pain, it powers him, and we're not going to know what it is, and that's okay. Like,
do you know? I think having watched these films and trying to get a sense of what Star Trek is, I think it's like there's a million different Star Treks and different people like it for different reasons.
Yeah.
But I think maybe because, like you, Dave, grew up watching The Next Generation, and I think that by then there's loads in there, often siphoned through Picard, of these, like, what is good, what is goodness, what is being human. And it felt like it reminded me loads of one of those moments where, slightly declarative, like, it's okay to make mistakes. My favourite Picard quote is it's impossible to make no mistakes and still lose. That's not failure, that's life. And then that is life. This felt like that. And the fans, I think, do really love this scene because of, and it's like seen as quite theatrical and a bit of a throwback to Kirk in the original series. But I'm going
to ask you some difficult questions now to wrap up before we find out how the response to the movie, and that is standout scene, standout performance. And I'm going to go first with performance so I can get in there, and it is David Warner.
Really?
I thought he was excellent. He is really underused, and I found
he's barely in it.
I know he's barely in it. That's okay. It's a bit of a cheap response from me.
Rob's one is Catwoman.
It was it was between him and Scotty. But honestly, I just thought he was excellent, and I'm pretty sure I realised watching this, and I haven't checked this, and it'll be apparent when we get there. I'm pretty sure he's in the next movie as well, playing a different character, and I can completely see what I feel like. They were like, "Oh, this guy's really good. We should see if he'll come back because he's really good." I thought he was fantastic, but it's also easy because he only has about 8 lines.
I think I'd probably have to give it to Cyborg. Sorry, I forget the actor's name.
Yeah,
he's the most interesting character in the film for me.
Yeah,
quite a layered character, and I think, you know, his character has a charisma, and I thought he as an actor had a charisma as well.
As a complete newcomer.
Yeah, I thought he did a great job. Probably of all of the villains, the actual personal antagonists that have been in Star Trek movies thus far, I think he has done the best job.
I will say DeForest Kelley as Bones.
Yeah.
Because of that scene, I feel like that when he's the scene's slightly obvious, isn't it? We've just talked about it. In as much as you kind of go, he's going to go through some pain, but then I don't know. There's that moment where it steps up to that, and he kind of admits the horrible kind of crux of it, and it is affecting. I thought it was good. I basically think I've seen almost all of the main cast be better in other films, so it's quite a difficult one to answer.
How about standout scene? And I just want to say, I'm saying standout doesn't mean good. Just a scene that stands out. Okay, Rob, go on.
Mine was a scene. It was also a stand-up scene when they were standing up on Spock's rocket boots in that elevator shaft.
Oh yes,
but also weren't.
Oh yeah.
There were two. They were cut to a shot of the feet, and all the feet were dangling, and then it would cut to a shot, and they're just like impossibly Spock is holding both
very strong
men up.
He's very strong. Yeah, must be.
And
it
was one of a few scenes that I just felt just didn't. I don't know why the rocket boots were in this movie at all.
Yeah.
I don't know why the Uhura dance scene was in it at all. Why did they need a bit where they had to rocket up a big elevator shaft?
Yeah.
I just thought it was comically bad.
Well, in the same vein, then my standout scene is probably Sulu and Chekhov in Yosemite. Also in Yosemite, but apparently not with the Fab Three.
I mean, that's
not
classic.
Invited.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're going, what they're doing.
Did they actually shoot on location in Yosemite?
They did.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah, they did.
And
they also built a fiberglass El Capitan.
It's just wow. It's just not very. It's just a bad scene. It's not a good interaction with Uhura, and
they never seem like two friends who are enjoying some shore
exactly
together.
None of that. I think it was just a real. It was like we got to do a scene with we should explain what Chekhov and Sulu are up to. Just going on a walk. Also in Yosemite, we're in Yosemite filming anyway. Yeah, let's just do that. It just didn't work. It was a bad scene.
I like all of my favourite scene is probably the prologue scene for the reasons I've said.
Yes.
I liked that it had you don't know where it is. You get the sense of that guy grabbing for his gun. That's just, there's danger. Also, if it's all right to go on a tiny bit of a tangent as well, I think that the horse that he's riding on has a horn. I'm pretty sure
it does. It did.
It's a unicorn.
Yeah.
And it's the weirdest thing, and this is partly why I thought this film was going to be terrible. I was reading Captain's Log, which I've shown you both, which is Shatner's daughter's write-up of his thoughts on making the film. And for the longest time, he just got attached to ideas in a way where you're like, oh my God, you've got no taste and you're insane, which is why I was quite surprised that scene was so enjoyable. And he really wanted Cyborg to have a unicorn and to be riding around on it. And I'm going to.
No, I feel strongly about this. Damn it.
And he also wanted them to go to the center of the universe, and he had to be talked out of that. It's like, we don't know where the center.
We got to do galaxy. Please let us do galaxy.
There's some
no,
science.
we can't do universe. Like we can't. Not all the way to the universe. Yeah, I mean that was. I'm glad they talked him out of that.
He diplomatically describes having to be talked down from insisting that this unicorn is going to be in the film. Once we changed his character, he was going to be like a military leader. We also had to get rid of the unicorn, since the unicorn was an extension of his violent nature, my father explained. This is the weirdness of this book, where she's constantly saying, my father explains. Also, since I don't go to many movies, I was unaware of how many unicorns have been used in some of these science fiction films. I guess he's thinking of like Legend and stuff in the 80s. David loved the unicorn, screenwriter, and suggested a wonderful shot where, as the shuttle leaves, the unicorn looks after it as it takes off. So there was this shot of the unicorn watching the spaceship leave, and the picture of the unicorn and the spaceship stuck in my mind, and I fell in love with it. It was hard for me to give up the unicorn idea until I looked at some of these movies. And then similarly, defining Cyborg's mode of travel brought up yet another point needing clarification. Where exactly did he want to get to? I wanted the destination to be the center of the universe, since that's where I'd envisaged God residing. Then it was pointed out to me that there is no God, whereupon I responded that we wanted it to appear as though God was there. But Gene pointed out that in the 23rd century, only 11% of the galaxy would have been discovered, and there would have been no way for us to have discovered the center of the universe by that point. Not only that, but there is no center of the universe. So they got a scientist to explain that there is no center of the universe. It's just like him stepping back from his mad ideas all the time. But it was great to see that the unicorn was still in there.
Wow, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, Nath. To be
Sorry,
honest,
yeah,
you should have mentioned
maybe.
the unicorns sooner. I didn't even notice a unicorn at any point. So
And before we move on, can I just say the special effects were rubbish, noticeably worse. ILM was busy doing Ghostbusters 2 and Raiders of the Lost. In Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
They really were, and they stood out. In as much as I kept noticing them,
Flipping Spielberg. You may, if it wasn't for him, we'd have had Sean Connery and ILM involved in this movie.
The Great Barrier was just. One of the reviews called it like Windex. It was like there for 2 seconds.
Like 18 lava lamps kind of. It wasn't good. It was
Stop
not
motion animation on the gun turrets.
The Great Barrier at the center of the galaxy. I expected a bit more.
Wobbly ships. I thought it was terrible.
It wasn't good. Yeah, the stop motion was strange, and again, it felt like a massive step back from where we've been enjoying.
Poor old Bill Shatner.
But how was the movie received, Nath?
Oh, how was it received? I've only pulled out 2 quotes. It was a step down. Everyone was basically the reaction was quite negative. Roger Ebert, for example, who we keep returning to, called it a mess.
Oh, I love how he's so pithy. Good fun.
He's always. This is why he's always on posters. But I also really enjoyed this comment, which is a contemporary comment. So it's from now. Someone on Reddit going through saying, I love Star Trek V. I mean, it starts with a 58-year-old Shatner free climbing El Capitan, and it ends with Spock shooting God in the face. What's not to love?
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're going to love it, that's why. Critical reception was, oh man, there's this really sad story where Shatner, they just don't know whether it's good or not. He knows that he's had to kind of fight through compromises in budget. Nimoy and DeForest Kelly's characters were supposed to betray him. They said, no, we're not. That's where that whole scene came from,
right?
That giving them reasons not to, I guess. He knew it wasn't what he wanted it to be. He's climbed down on all of his ideas. And Nimoy rings him in the morning, the day after the official opening, and reads him a positive review from the LA Times, and he's so touched that he cries.
That's nice.
Then it just all goes wrong. And obviously, like in his book, in Captain's Log, he's like, and this is a great movie and I'm proud. And then like he uses loads of the same material, but then in his Star Trek Memories book, he's like, and I know it wasn't a good film. I don't think it was bad, but it's not everything it could have been. So it actually had a record opening weekend and then dropped off. Harv Bennett was always like, his explanation was it had been 3 years instead of 2. They got into a cycle of it being every 2 years. And he was saying that maybe that regularity kind of had bumped Star Trek fans out of every Thanksgiving. They were going to watch Star Trek, and then they would watch it again and again in the run up to the Christmas. This one came out a little bit later in the year, but also it had been a year delayed, and also The Next Generation was around, and Harv Bennett was kind of like, are they having this? Why would they go 5 times to see this when they can watch Star Trek every week on TV? Who knows whether that's true? But the box office was 70 million, down from 100 and whatever it was.
Yeesh.
So it's the lowest, but it was off a 33 million budget, so it's still comfortably made money, and that's before kind of home entertainment. And this is in a year, 1989, where the number 1 films globally, Indiana Jones, well done, Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Number 2 was Batman, and number 3 was Back to the Future 2. It was also one of the most crowded summers ever. They call it Summer of Discontent or Summer 2, the sequel, which is packed with kind of big movies like Lethal Weapon 2.
Really interesting about the regularity, because I feel like Star Wars, for example, went the other way when they were too regular with their movies in the sequel era. You know, not just the mainline entries, but then you had Rogue One and Solo. And I feel like audiences who didn't love Star Wars, who just kind of liked it and maybe saw it as like a movie event of the year, just became confused about what was going on and just tired of it. And
this is it. Well, Star Trek's always been this one thing with this one crew. And this is interesting because obviously The Next Generation is coming up, and a couple of things about the planning for the next film, this makes it relevant. So they had that sense of familiarity in these people returning. So I guess it might hurt if you knew every year that it was going to be the main 3 from Star Wars. You're kind of waiting for them to come back.
Well, this leads us on to Rob's recommendations, and I mean, good luck, Rob. If you can pull a recommendation out of this one, I'll be very impressed. Has Final Frontier made you think of anything?
It did make me think of some things. These are quite tenuous, but they're just things that I was reminded of whilst I was watching the film. One of them we've been talking about recently anyway, and that comes with the whole getting through a barrier and finding what you think is going to be a god, but is actually something not that great. And it's the architect in the Matrix movies.
Yes.
Again, another man with a white beard who turns out to be not very nice, actually. And in that instance, in both cases, you've got Sybok in Star Trek who really, really believes that if I get here, the good thing will happen. And similarly, in the Matrix, Morpheus acts as that sort of like he's got so much faith in his beliefs.
Yes.
And when Neo gets through the barrier and meets the architect, it all turns out to be a load of rubbish. Morpheus is, his belief that the world will be saved when the one gets to the center of the Matrix, it turns out to be not true. I think it's quite that trope of a false god or an evil god is quite prevalent throughout sci-fi. But that was the one example I could think of readily. It also made me think. With Sybok being like an outcast in Vulcan society because of his crime of having emotions, it made me think of the film Equilibrium with Christian Bale. I don't know if either of you have seen that.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is a film I think I like a lot more than it deserves. But I really, really enjoyed Equilibrium back in the days when The Matrix was like the best thing in the world. I thought Equilibrium was a very cool sort of Matrix wannabe, very 1984, very surveillance state. Christian Bale stars as this guy who is an enforcer for the state, and then he forgets to take his emotion-killing medicine one day.
He reads a poem.
He reads a book and he listens to some music. He's like, "Oh, I gotta kill everyone," and it's great. There's a scene in that where he's forced to kill some dogs, and that's what breaks him. That's when he's like, I can't pretend that I'm not feeling this anymore. I am feeling it.
There's a Keats poem, isn't there? In there,
I can't remember
he gets
exactly.
out about a Keats poem, so he ends civilization.
Wow. Okay, fair enough. I'm not massively into poetry either. So.
I always forget whether it's John or Sean Pertwee who's the son. He plays Godface Man,
right,
in this film. Also, very quickly, I thought of Interstellar as well.
Okay.
The whole going through that impassable barrier bit, the center of the galaxy. In Interstellar, it's a black hole that they cross. But I love the idea of people in sci-fi going through things where they're not sure if they're going to survive on the other side. They don't know the physical nature of what's going to be on the other side, and that's very exciting.
Yeah.
If you want a good example of it, watch Interstellar.
I was going to say, do you think Interstellar is a better film than Star Trek V: The Final Frontier?
I do think Interstellar is a better
take a
film,
second to think about it.
Yeah.
What is that room, by the way, on the Enterprise where they've got the ship's wheel and they all look out?
I assumed
is
it
it
was
like 10 forward?
Yeah, I thought it was like the captain's ready room.
Right.
Isn't it in the background when he gets his special glasses and drink from Bones?
No, that's on Earth.
Is it?
He's on Earth
Shut
at that
my
point.
mouth, then.
Yeah, I don't know. But a new room, I enjoyed it. The room of many feelings. Well, you've done well there, Rob. I think you've pulled out two films I'd actually probably prefer to watch.
Equilibrium is fun as hell.
And The Matrix 3.
20 years
which I'm not sure I would. I'm scared to ask you this question. This is going to be very telling. We're
having some engine trouble.
We've been running along at warp factor 5 after the first 4 movies. How are you feeling? What speed are we travelling now that you've seen Star Trek V: The Final Frontier?
We have encountered some engine trouble, unfortunately.
Space turbulence.
I've been thinking about this. We're down to warp 4.
Okay. Yeah.
We're decelerating.
Yes.
But we've not decelerated enough that we're down below warp 4 yet, but we are decelerating.
Can I ask
I would like something to propel us forward again.
Yeah.
Were there things in this which did make you still enjoy? I guess like there
was less of it. And I was disappointed. That was one of my main disappointments from this movie was I didn't feel like the thing I'm starting to enjoy, that interplay between Kirk, Spock, and Bones. I didn't feel enough of it in this film.
Fair.
I liked. I'm liking Kirk a lot more. I remember in the very first, after we've seen the first film, I really disliked Kirk's character quite strongly.
Yeah.
But I really liked him when he said, "You're not taking my pain away from me. That's what makes me human." Right. I'm certainly warming to him as a character more. But obviously, I don't know what Star Trek is as well as you two do. But I didn't feel that what I'd just watched was particularly Star Trek-y, and I found that was my main disappointment with it.
Yeah, well, as Nate said, it's many, many things, and to different things to different people. I think some of it is, some of it isn't. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. It's a bit of a mess. It is a mess of a film, as Mr. Ebert said. So I think that's fair enough. Well, and I think Warp 4 is fair enough. We'll find out what that means for Rob's potential Star Trek fandom at the end of the show. But first, we have to find out from Nath what movie we're going to be watching next week, and set the scene, if you would.
I will set the scene. As I said, the film performed okay. It still made money, not as much money as it had been making, and not enough to make the next steps obvious. In every other case, they had they'd started to greenlight the movies quite quickly. The 25th anniversary of Star Trek was coming up in 1991. So if they were going to stick to their 2-year schedule, sticking to that 2-year schedule was kind of more important than ever. And this kind of tension of, okay, are we going to change stuff at this point? Because the next generation is kind of up and running. So there's obviously like Star Trek is becoming slightly broader. Somewhere in the middle of producing, I think going back another whole movie, Star Trek 4, Harve Bennett starts to, I kind of mentioned that Star Trek Academy idea of these guys are getting expensive. Everybody, all of the senior players know it. It's like you can't have a property that's been going this long without accruing those costs. 25 years, your stars are just going to cost loads of money. So Harve Bennett pitches a Star Trek Academy film. And the kind of really interesting thing is that the beats of it are the beats of the film that will come up later, J.J. Abrams' remake of Star Trek. So when you read a kind of praise, you're kind of, that's crazy. And it reminds me again of how this like similar ideas, like bringing it back for TV eventually kind of becomes Next Generation with some of the same scripts. Like these ideas, once they're kind of formulated, they just kind of hang around. Harve Bennett loves this idea. He's kind of like, we can bookend this with the cast if the studio requests that at one point. Their head of production at a certain point is a guy called Ned Tannen, and he's like, yes, let's do this. I can see this would set us up for movies in the future. We're going to lower our costs. Star Trek basically makes money no matter what we do. So if we can lower the costs, we're in serious business. He then basically left, and they kind of got into the new regime wants to see a version with Kirk and Spock. They do a bookend version where Kirk's like, hey, well, did I ever tell you about the time that me and Spock met each other?
Oh, God.
And they write that, and then it's still a no. Roddenberry hates it. He thinks it's going to be like Police Academy, which is like that kind of raucous, sexy police show, series from the 80s. Eventually they say, no, we're simply not making it. So Harve Bennett leaves.
Oh, wow.
He leaves Paramount and he's not involved in the next film at all. It's quite acrimonious. He said he started drinking shortly afterwards, and it had a massively negative impact on his life. So,
blimey.
So they call Nimoy and they say, we really need to get this film out for 1991. What can you do? He has a story, and his story is to do with the political kind of situation going on. We talked about the Klingons being like the Russians. The wall had just come down. So he's kind of like, well, what if we explore that? And this really made me think, you know, Shatner's idea has just got one of those big, clanging, stupid sci-fi, like, I'm going to meet God. Let's go meet God. It's rubbish. You can do it well, but as an idea, it's not really got loads to it. And I kind of made me think, you know, Nimoy, the two ideas that he's picked out here, like Wales and this one, they've got more to
Wales and the Berlin Wall.
I guess he's just a liberal, isn't he? He's just going, oh, what am I sad about today? But he's got more to it. He goes, and there's some wrangling and there's all sorts of nonsense, but the short version is he goes and gets Nick Meyer back, so the guy who made Wrath of Khan. He comes back, writes the movie to Spock's story. They have, again, some wrangling about budgets, but they solved these by cutting some stuff and also reusing some of the sets which are currently being used by the TV show. So those productions are kind of dovetailing in an interesting way. They get a green light on the 13th of February 1991. One of the things which eventually they were wrangling over the last $5 million, and Nick Mayer's like, I'm not going to direct a movie which is going to be rubbish. I know that if we cut these things out, it's going to be rubbish. I won't do it. The head of Gulf and Western, so like the big corporation that owns Paramount, changes, and the guy who comes in is the father of one of the producers, and he's just like, hey, you need that $5 million?
We can find that.
You can have
I'm sure we
$5
can
million.
find that.
So they start, the green light in February 1991. They start shooting in April 1991. They shoot for 55 days, and the film is released in December of that year. So
quite a turnaround.
Yes, nice and quick. Bit of context from 1990, the year that this skips, we're in a new decade.
I know.
That's quite obvious. I think it's fair to say that Star Trek is even more increasingly out of step with what's being made at this point. And I think it was always, like we kind of talking in those first episodes, it was always slightly less fashionable than the other things that were going on in terms of Spielberg and Lucas and Star Wars and E.T. and Indiana Jones. And now blockbusters have moved on. They're getting bigger. They're getting to it's the evolution to where we are now, where you get these massive films which kind of pull in on all media, and they're like these huge international successes, and they need to almost make $1 billion to make any money. We're getting there at this stage in the 90s. Independent cinema is about to have a bit of resurgence as a response to that, and that doesn't do Star Trek any favors either. It's kind of hanging on. I guess it's a very fanish, cultish thing. So in 1990, global box office, number 1 is Ghost.
Ooh.
Number 2 is Home Alone.
Ah.
And number 3 is Pretty Woman.
Ooh.
And sci-fi films made that year: Total Recall, Back to the Future 3, it might be 2, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is actually an independent film. It's a New Line film.
Oh, right.
They were bought by Warner shortly afterwards, but it was at that time the most successful independent movie ever. RoboCop 2 and Predator 2. Predator 2, I didn't realise, was directed by Irving Kershner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, who would have thought that? Who
Yeah.
made Empire Strikes Back.
He's had an interesting career.
And then 1991, the top 3 movies at the box office were T2, Judgment Day. So you kind of see even that kind of hard edge of, like, Terminator's an 18. It's a horrible film.
Yeah.
And then Terminator 2's it might even be a 12 now. But I think it was 15 at the time, or maybe it's the other way around. And it's way more, it's softer. It's a family film, really. Number 2, Robin Hood, Prince of
Family
Thieves.
film.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Isn't it? It's about making a family with a robot.
Yeah.
And saving the world.
It's a lot more of a family film than the first Terminator, for sure.
Home Alone's a family film.
There is that man that's true. There is that man that they take from his home and then say, you've actually caused the end of the world and you're going to have to kill yourself this evening.
Yeah.
And then he does that.
Yeah, and then, doesn't that, the I can't remember what it is. The liquid one, kills the kid's family and the dog,
Wolfie.
I think. Yeah, Wolfie.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah, not great. And number 3 was Beauty and the Beast, anyway.
Okay.
So Disney.
Oh, the Disney.
Disney's on a good run.
Disney's in,
Yeah.
finally.
Well, yeah. That was huge. I think it was bigger than, they'd had The Little Mermaid and they'd had Aladdin, but that was bigger than...
I can remember going to see that at the cinema.
Beauty and the Beast, I remember as being like, that felt when Disney had felt important, the ballroom scene, just the animation on that. I can remember that trailer and seeing that and thinking, oh my God,
do you know
how have they done that?
Do you know, I think of Beauty and the Beast, which is not one of my favourite Disney movies by any stretch, but Angela Lansbury's got a kid, and she's a cup, right?
No, she's
the teapot.
And her kid's called Chip.
Yeah.
That is good.
Because he's chipped, it's great.
I mean, that is good. And sci-fi movies, Rocketeer and Critters 3 are the only ones I could pull out from.
Oh my God.
Oh dear.
That's not a good couple of years for sci-fi. I mean, you've T2, maybe RoboCop 2, although I can't really picture that right now.
We're talking about E.T., The
I
Thing,
know, yeah.
Blade
it's just
Runner.
really coming off, isn't it? And I the rise of kind of rom-com seems to be in there, like family.
Yeah.
It's...
I mean, I'd argue the golden age of sci-fi is over by this stage.
I think you're right.
I think you're right. But you haven't seen the next movie.
We're 8 years away from The Phantom Menace.
Wow.
Oh, thank God. And Nathan, are you going to tell Rob the title of the next movie?
It's called Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country.
Which I didn't realise until I was talking to Nathan recently is a probably quite famous quote from something which you may or may not be aware of, but I'll leave that hanging in the air. I didn't know all this year.
Did they mention it in the first film? Also?
Yes, they do, because I heard him say... Is it the first one, or it might even be Wrath of Khan? I think it's Wrath of Khan, because I think it's a Nick Meyer thing.
Right. Yeah, no, he wanted to call it The Undiscovered Country.
Yes, he did. Yeah. And he's finally got his way. And I must say, revisiting these movies... Well, certainly I think of Nick Meyer as an extremely good, positive presence in Star Trek. I love Wrath of Khan. He made that.
Yeah.
He did all the San Francisco stuff in Voyage Home.
He's not fussy or intellectual, is he? He's just getting stuff done and he's putting jokes in if he can.
So the idea of him being back at the helm for another movie, for me at least, I don't know that Rob would feel the same because he's not a huge Khan fan. I'm like, this feels good.
I've never seen this film.
I'm so excited, and I think it's fair enough to say that
You've not seen it.
Oh yeah, I'm with you on this one. I've never, and
Wow.
in a way, this is partly why we're doing this podcast, because Dave said something. We were talking about how much we love Sulu about 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and Dave was like, "And that bit in that film where he does this thing." And
there's
I was like,
a quote. There's
I
a
don't
quote he does, and I don't know. I think I said it to Nathan. I told him the whole scene anyway. It's a great bit, and it's coming up in this next movie. And Nathan wasn't really sure. I was like, "Oh, we should watch the Star Trek movies." And here we are, we're doing it, but you're our guinea pig to see if we can make you like them as well. And I personally, it'd be interesting to see what you guys think. I don't want to talk it up too much, but it's exciting to me that Nick Meyer is back, and I think that will be apparent. You will see his hand at the tiller.
Events of 1991. Before I stop talking, see if you remember any of these. The Iraq War.
I do.
Operation Desert Storm. A Birmingham 6 were released.
Oh.
After several years of wrongful imprisonment. John McCarthy and Terry Waite were freed from their prisons at the hands of terrorists in the Middle East. Robert Maxwell fell off his yacht and died. The Mirror Group collapsed under the weight of financial nonsense. Well, it didn't collapse, it's still going, but there was certainly some malfeasance. There was a coup in Russia, which failed, but then eventually the Soviet Union did break up at Christmas time. In that year, and
around about the same time the Star Trek movie comes out now.
Yes, which is actually what made me think, hey, Nimoy was on to, he knew it was,
he knew he just winks at everybody as he walks away.
I'm not saying I did this, but
nothing to do with me.
Freddie Mercury died. Rodney King abuse, assault happened in LA riots. Super Nintendo was released in the US.
Okay,
so
finally a bit of good news. This has been miserable.
A year of contrasts in America. And Alan Partridge, as a character, made his first appearance on the radio.
91.
Yeah, I can't remember what the news show was, but they had like a parody news show, didn't they?
Yes.
In terms of music,
Day to Day.
I did not know this before I wore this T-shirt today, but Nevermind by Nirvana obviously released in 1991. I'm wearing a Nirvana T-shirt for those who can't see sound. Bryan Adams' Everything I Do It For You was on top of the charts 16 weeks as part of the brilliant film, which I saw at the cinema 5 times, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
I saw it at the cinema twice.
Chatham Cannon. Well, I beat you by 3 times. So
I wasn't comparing myself. I know how much you love that movie. I just wanted to say it touched my life too.
I've never seen a film 5 times at the cinema.
I was 10.
My record is 4 for Return of the King.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's the time spent in there is probably about the same.
Yeah.
If I was going to pick a movie from that trilogy to see 4 times, it wouldn't be Return of the King. Would you change if you could? Or were you?
Well, I guess it was the last one, so he's like, "This is it for me."
But to see it 4
Well, it's
times.
just the Pelennor Field scene. I just had to see that in cinema as many times as I possibly could.
Yeah,
fair enough.
The final time I saw it, it was just me and my friend in there.
Oh, really?
It was like right at the end of the run.
Yeah.
Are you counting
Still
extended
good.
edition re-releases, or is this all like first theatrical run?
Oh, this
First
is
time
all-
it came out.
yeah, yeah.
Wow, nice.
You can quote along at that point when it's just you and your mate. So I'm going to be saying some of the words as
Unless I am the mate, in which case, please don't do that. Other bits of music, just to finish off. There's No Other Way by Blur was released in 1991. Losing My Religion by R.E.M., Enter Sandman by Metallica, and I Wanna Sex You Up by Colour Me Bad. Everyone remember that?
No, I can't say. I was going to say
wanna
some
sex
big
you up
important music there, and
all
then that one.
night. I want to take off all your clothes.
Stop looking at me when you say that, please. Making me uncomfortable. Yeah, a better year for music than for film, I would say. And
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
No, I know, but that's one among that towers over everything else, pretty much, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right, look, you can have your 2 movies, but we've previously been talking about, when was it, 1984 or something? It's that crazy top 10.
Yeah, agree.
Excellent. So we've reached the end of Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. Thank God. I've got to be honest, this one's been hanging over me a little bit. I've actually enjoyed it. I really enjoyed watching it.
The lows have not been as low as I thought.
I've enjoyed talking about it, but it is definitely not one of the best of the movies we've seen so far. I hope that we can do a little bit better next week with Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, a movie I'm very excited to show my friends and all of you at home. If you haven't watched it yet, or even if you have, just watch it again. And then we can reconvene here next Monday to talk about it as we always do. Yes. But also, as we always do, before we say goodbye, there is one more question I have to ask. I think I know the answer this week. Rob, are you a Star Trek fan yet?
No.
No.
The horse neck pinch was for nothing.
You've been listening to Red Shirt Cinema Club. If you've enjoyed listening, rating and reviewing the podcast would really help us out. We'll be back next Monday with another episode, and in the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email to redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com, where a team of highly trained tribbles await your correspondence. See you next week.